the story. This is a Connemara Irish pronunciation
Shawan.
and a Munster Irish pronunciation.
Shalvan.
So Shalvan and Shalvan, which becomes even more salient when we embed it in the full sentence. So again, the first pronunciation is Connemara.
Hassan toga noch imneach an Shawan foskil.
The second pronunciation is Munster.
Osig an Togan of Imniak and Shalvan for school.
It almost sounds like it's shifted to an iambic language. So the problem I want to talk about is the fact that when we do a elicitation study, if we elicit words in isolation, we're not just eliciting a phonological word. We're eliciting segments, mora, syllable, feet, words, phrases, intonational phrases, and the entire utterance. This is something that Hyman noticed in '77 and Gordon most recently published on in 2014. The idea is that even if a word is in isolation, we're still computing representation at all levels of the prosodic hierarchy. So if we want to make a comment on what is Irish stress, we have to be able to tease apart different layers of the phonological hierarchy. So the question is, what are the phonetic correlates of stress at the prosodic word level in Irish, and in what ways are these different or affected by phrasal accents? Or how do we disentangle prosodic word and phrase stress in Irish? So I'll give you a little bit of background about the language and the study, talk about the methodology, and I'll break my results down into Connemara Irish, which I have nice strong results for, and preliminary extension to Munster Irish, because there is some reorganization of the data that needs to be done there. Discussion and some next steps. So Emily Elfner, in her dissertation and further work, studied Connemara Irish in this region just west of Galway, primarily based here out of Carrow or Chiarrua, where several of us in the room have lived at one point or another. And what she found is if you have a sentence like Díolta Laurlin Dahul Blachna Alda, you have this kind of representation phonologically. And she found that HL, or these falling accents, associate with the stressed syllable in the rightmost word of every phonological phrase. So Dahul gets a falling accent, and Alya gets a falling accent from multiple places. She found rising, or LH accents, associate with the the stress syllable in the leftmost word of every non-minimal phonological phrase. So Laurlini gets a rising intonation, and Díolta gets a rising pitch accent. This leaves the object noun completely unaccented by phrase structure. This is a good place to look for what word stress is. So, if we take a sentence like Fluchal an Buchel Doyle Blachan Corcra, the handsome boy picked purple flowers. It's fun to say in either language. We predict that this object noun will not get a phrasal pitch accent because we know Fluchal and an Buchel, the boy, will get the accents from those two phrases, but this is not a non-minimal phrase and doesn't provide a phrasal accent. If we add a demonstrative to the object noun, based on the work I was actually doing that the study fell out of, we predict that we add additional structure that looks like this. So, Fluchal and Buchel Doyle na Blachan Corcra Ud, or yonder purple flowers. Fluchal and Buchel would get the same accents as the other sentence, but in this case we've added additional phrasal structure and predict that we should be able to force a pitch accent onto the object noun. Spoiler alert, this is exactly what we find. On the object noun here, we see this nice rising pitch, and adding the demonstrative, which is now the rightmost word in the phrase, we see this nice falling pitch accent on the demonstrative. Play this token for you.
Ramshin Academy, Goldblickacha, Lesson Hogani Leskula Ud.
I had warned my consultants that the sentences that I was eliciting were rather contrived, because it's not often you say verb, noun, adjective, demonstrative. It's a weird structure. So they did have a little bit of trouble with it, but we can predictions are still borne out, even though there are those slight pauses in the utterance, which weren't all that frequent. For methodology, I had 40 target nouns ranging between 2 to 5 syllables. Anything above 3 syllables is incredibly rare in Irish, but I did find some 4 and 5 syllable words. And we embedded them into 3 possible sentential positions, in the subject of the sentence, in the object of the sentence, or in the object plus demonstrative condition. These 120 sentences were randomized with 40 filler tokens, which were shonachal or proverbs, things like that, and presented on my laptop there in PowerPoint. The recitation was completely done through the medium of Irish, but English translations did follow on the subsequent slides. I also invited the speakers to give me corrections on either the grammar of the sentence or the translation itself. They were also further instructed to nativize the sentences into their own dialect as much as possible. And we can see that they did this because they ignored spelling rules, and if there was one type of mutation that was written, they might produce another one if that was what their dialect was. Recorded 4 native speakers of Irish, 2 females between 18 and 25 from Kiarua, the same place that Emily Elfner did her dissertation work, 1 18 to 25-year-old female speaker from Kilnamartyra in County Cork, and 1 female native speaker, 32 to 40, from Anchanfall in County Waterford. For those unfamiliar, this is the Connemara dialect region to the west of Pointer, and everything below that is the Munster region. So I have 2 Connemara speakers, 2 Munster speakers. Put the various tokens into one of the 3 conditions based on the sentence they were taken out of, and compared the stressed syllable with the immediately adjacent following syllable. So we subtract the unstressed syllable from the stressed syllable, and recorded things like the difference in mean, max, minimum, and full range of hertz, the same measures on decibels, syllable length in milliseconds, which I'm actually not going to talk about today, and then, of course, subjectively, whether a pitch accent is seen or not. Ran chi-squared tests on the binary, did I notice a pitch accent or not? Ran a generalized linear model on the various phonetic correlates, and some 2 sample t-tests to find out what word stress is that are on. So the prediction is, if we have the sentence which you already heard, without a demonstrative, we don't see a pitch accent on this object noun. With the demonstrative, we predict that we will find a pitch accent on the object noun. This is a little hard to see, but it is exactly what we found. This red line is the word flowers, the pitch accent on plachana in subject position. We can see this nice rising pitch peak here. In the demonstrative condition, we see this black line almost perfectly follows the red one that was in subject condition, and the object noun is this nice flat intonational structure. Subjectively looking at the spectrogram and saying, is there a pitch accent? We can see that the subject and demonstrative conditions were almost identical. 57 tokens in subject showing a pitch accent and 55 in the demonstrative, and the object condition is the exact opposite. And this is a significant difference. I will break it out by the individual comparisons shortly, but we can see subjectively the predictions were borne out. Looking at the subtraction of the immediately adjacent unstressed syllable from the stressed syllable to find out what the pitch accent is, we found an interaction between the mean hertz between the 2 syllables and the range of hertz between the 2 syllables were significant predictors to tell us whether or not the target noun was in subject position or object position. Thus means that the phonetic correlates of phrasal accents is the interaction between mean hertz and the range of hertz. Further, there was no significant difference between objects in subject position and modified by demonstrative in object position, telling us that the subjects and the demonstrative modified objects are functioning exactly the same, which is what we predicted. So object nouns not modified by a demonstrative are also not modified by any phrasal prominence in Connemara Irish whatsoever. So then we can look at the difference between the stressed syllable and the unstressed syllable, and whatever we find between these things, rather than the subtraction of one from the other, is what word stress must be, because we know we're not dealing with phrasal stress in object position. And there were a lot of correlates with word stress. Now, the data at present don't support interaction testing. It's going to require some additional reorganization. We will get to that eventually, but we do know it was the interaction of these two measures that indicated phrasal prominence. This means that in Connemara Irish, the exact same cues that cue us to word stress also cue us to phrasal prominence. So there's 5 main effects that show correlations with word level prominence in Western Irish, and phrase level prominence enhances 2 of them. This is a potential reason for pitch accent fixed alignment in this dialect. If you are going to use the exact same cues for word level stress that you're going to use for phrasal level stress, why would you realize the 2 cues on different syllables? You can simply enhance the cues. Okay, once again, same predictions for Munster Irish. Without the demonstrative, we won't have stress on the object noun. With the demonstrative, we won't have a phrase accent. With the demonstrative, we'll force a phrasal accent onto the object noun. The Munster Irish numbers are in red. The Connemara numbers you had already seen are in black beside it. And the reason there's fewer numbers in Munster Irish is I didn't always have an immediate adjacent syllable to be able to compare to, because the Munster Irish stress shifted to either the second or third syllable, not leaving me with the same comparison. So those tokens were eliminated for this study. Breaking them down by position, we can see that we can significantly predict whether a noun is in subject versus object position by the presence or absence of a pitch accent. We cannot tell if it is in object modified by demonstrative or subject position, meaning they're functionally the same, the demonstrative and subject, and we see the same numbers for object versus demonstrative conditions. So the same prediction that we had for Connemara Irish was also borne out for Munster Irish. So then we do the exact same thing, and we compare the unstressed syllable to the stressed syllable. And we find something very different in Munster Irish compared to Connemara Irish. Now, crucially, these are the 2 factors that were shown to be manipulated by phrasal prominence or pitch accents, and they are not significant predictors of word level stress. In Connemara Irish, only the mean decibel wasn't a significant predictor. In Munster Irish, only the max hertz and the range of decibels across the syllable are significant predictors of word level prominence. Again, the data at present don't support interaction testing. We will get to that at some point, but there are some differences. The Cork speaker, one from Kilnamartyra, had a rising accent on the target nouns, but the Waterford speaker tended to display a falling accent on the target nouns, dissimilar to the other 3. But it's still in the same place. It was still where we would predict it based on the sentence position, but a different type of accent. And there's also some evidence of pitch accent movement or variable tone alignment between the 2 speakers. So unlike the Connemara Irish, mean hertz and range hertz are not correlated with word stress in Munster Irish. The word and the phrasal prominence are instantiated by separate phonetic cues in the Southern dialect, the Munster dialect. Connemara Irish, they manipulated the exact same cues. This could actually tell us something about fixed tone alignment versus variable tone alignment. If word and phrasal prominence are using the exact same cues, we want to realize them on the same syllable. If they're realizing separate cues so that they don't get confused, it might be a good idea to put them on separate syllables. This could be what Gordon describes as an edge repulsion effect. In turn, possibly giving us a reason why Munster might have shifted its stress in the first place. So this is a possible historical explanation for Munster-Irish stress shift. There's a lot of next steps to this study. Subjectively, as a second language Irish speaker, I feel like duration is playing a significant key here. My first idea was to measure the duration of the syllable and compare that duration whether something was in subject position, object position, or object plus a demonstrative position. That isn't actually going to tell me anything about the word level stress. It would tell me if duration was somehow correlated with phrasal prominence. But the next step is to go back and actually isolate the vowels, measure them, and find out what the average short vowel and the average long vowel is, and then if it's affected by word or phrasal prominence. Reorganization of the data to look for interactions. Right now we have 5 main effects that show word level prominence in Connemara Irish. It would be really nice if we could shrink that list down and find significant interactions. And more detailed analysis of the shifted stress tokens in Munster Irish, including what pitch accents are actually doing. Are they always rising or always falling, or is there variability within the speakers? Do they always show fixed alignment versus variable alignment, and how variable is that variable alignment for the speakers? And what are the phonetic correlates in Munster Irish of phrasal level prominence? We predicted that they would be the same, but not having all of the tokens from the shifted stress tokens made it impossible to test still. I need to acknowledge my consultants who helped me out with this, proofreaders in Ireland, and 3 research assistants, 2 of which are not here today. I was hoping they could be, and of course, professors and grad students both here and at the University of Ulster, where I did this research. But Amila Magiv, Agus, in Kesh Magiv. Some questions. Explained that too thoroughly.
I wanted a more thorough explanation of one point. So I didn't quite follow your argumentation for why stress shift might be occurring in Munster Irish, because if I heard you right, you were saying in Connemara Irish we want to realize word stress and also phrasal stress with the same cues. I mean, it's stronger with phrasal if there's phrasal accent. And then in Munster Irish we use different cues. And somehow that means we want to move word stress elsewhere.
Right. So the default word stress is stress initial, and we only shift stress if the second or third syllable has more weight. In some instances, I think we do it if they are equally weighted, but not always. But if we're also realizing the pitch accent on the left edge of the word, which is the basic, then we don't want to use separate cues on the same syllable for 2 different prominences, so move one of them. In this case, it looks like possibly it was the stress that shifted, so the pitch accent can still be realized on the first syllable, and the word level stress, it shifted to an optimal syllable being heavier later in the word. And then when we do have initial stress in Munster Irish, we can realize the phrasal prominence somewhere else, and that's the variable.
Can I ask maybe a follow-up question then? So I think what I'm missing here is an explanation of how you think phrasal accents are attaching to the prosodic structure. So I understood from the discussion with Connemara earlier on that it kind of sounded like phrasal accents were piggybacking onto the main word stress.
Yep.
And yet it seems like you've got a different story from Munster actually, that phrasal accents are aligning to edges and not the main word stress necessarily.
I'm going back to the second slide. Okay, so what I think is, of course, we have a stressed syllable in a stressed foot of a stressed word of a stressed phrase, and so on and so forth. The descriptive distribution that Emily put in her dissertation was aligned with the stressed syllable. And in Connemara Irish, you can absolutely give that description because they're one and the same. But I think it's prosodically linked, and then within that unit, you can figure out where stress needs to go. So Emily didn't have to tackle the problem with Munster Irish. She was far wiser than I and stuck with a nice Connemara Irish dialect. But in Munster Irish, we definitely have to say more about it than just saying head.
Sorry.
I did this to you too.
Okay, it's friendly. It's totally fun. And it's not germane to your talk, so if you do not have an answer, please let me know. But I did notice that only the main lexical words were being parsed into prosodic words, so the handsome, the boys, but not the. So what's happening with determiners, and do you have any idea how they're being prosodified into prosodic structure in your book?
I may be the only person in the world that thinks determiners are prosodic words because I use a very strict matching algorithm. In Emily's work, she said that this was a syllable that was politicizing on, and it had to do with a strong start constraint. I really do think that these are independent prosodic words, especially when the structure is un, and there's a lot of boundary Q phenomenon that cue me to that. So there are phenomena that only happen between prosodic words that happen with this version of the determiner that don't happen with the determiner una, which isn't big enough to make a prosodic word. So it's monomoreaic, whereas this one could be analyzed as bimoreaic. So I really think that unvocal is actually a recursive prosodic word, where un is a word, vocal is a word, and unvocal is also a word. And this stems from, again, I'm probably one of the very few people who still believe that entity movement in Irish. All right, thank you very much.
We have about 5 minutes until the next
No one here about self-iberian.
Yeah, I think that
Law. Is the one who wants to keep going, and I know somebody that Mob. And I don't know what's that, is it something more on us? And you, as another direction, naturally not the same way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not the idea as original with me. Like, I can pick it up in grad school
So,
right back then, but it's just like there's been stress and accident, I guess. So, yeah. But it should be able to shift as well, right?
It does, yeah. But
You guys have ones with pages out of order, so it goes 1, 4, 2, 3.
It's okay, we have PhDs. Just.
They're numbered, it's fine.
So her idea was that some stress is basically a stress of accent.
Yeah.
So the fun thing is well in these kind of de-accented contexts. So as a second number of comment,
It's hard to think of.
to see whether it's a stress like the relative stress or not is not.
Yeah. It's hard to think of multi-stress word that goes into a compound.
Yeah, so maybe like I think we can find a syntactic context where there might be some residual pitch from like a preceding and following pitch, but there might be something in the middle that there would be no reason for it.
alright, so before I introduce Kelly's mismatches, I'm gonna talk to you about a little mismatch on the schedule. I just wanna point out that the session in the other room ended a half an hour early, so there's currently no talks happening there. So, the session in this room after lunch is actually gonna start half an hour later than the other one. So, in this room, the talks start at 2 p.m. In the other room, the talks will start at 1:30. Right? And so the last talk of this session will be Kelly Birdsong. She's going to tell us about mismatches between European Portuguese lexical and phonological words.
Hi guys. Some of you have already read this paper, though I haven't presented it before, so you haven't heard this talk. Yay for you. Yeah, today I'm going to be talking about one of my sort of pet languages that I've researched on several times, which is European Portuguese. Just give you a brief outline. First I'll give you what I've called the intro. The second one I've called the intro to European Portuguese. Then I'll talk, really the mismatch thing comes towards the last part of the talk. So I've got kind of a part A, which is numbers 3 and 4, and part B, which is numbers 5 and 6. And I forgot to write part A on the handout, so watch the cues on the screen. So as I said, I'm going to be talking about European Portuguese today, specifically the Lisbon dialect. Most of the examples I'm going to talk about today come from the Child's database. It's the Portuguese CCF corpus, so many of you are familiar with that database. Although this corpus is for child language, I'm actually looking at the adult words. And I'm talking about Sandy phenomena. And I put an exclamation point, mostly because I really like that phrase. So the interesting point about European Portuguese, which makes it fun to study, at least in my book, is that codas seem to be dispreferred in this dialect. And why I say that is that the inventory of codas is quite limited. Although there are many onsets, there are only 3 codas. And speakers of this dialect tend to redistribute these codas in ways that I'm going to talk about a little later, putting them in onset position basically wherever possible. And the final sort of overarching question I'm going to talk about in part B is what this redistribution means for the status and content of the phonological word in European Portuguese. So again, our brief intro to EP codas is they're restricted to the flat R, to an L, and to H. And these codas are subject to sort of alpha variation. L in coda surfaces the velar proximant as opposed to the pure L, as we call it. And H surfaces as J before voiced consonants. So some examples of these we see here. If you look at the first one, we have the flat R, which is pardon the lack of tab there. It's just sort of pronounced the same as far as I can tell. I haven't done acoustic measurements on it, but it's flat R and consonant, and the esh varies depending on what color it's in. Just a note here, if you're reading that may have been subject to editing part, I know that sounds scary, but that was just so that my phonemic representations match sort of well-established descriptions in the literature. So, about that resyllabification, I believe this is part A, or it will be soon. So, word final kahunas are resyllabified as onsets in two places in this dialect. Utterance immediately, if they're at the end of a word that precedes a vowel initial word, or utterance finally, and that only applies to R and L, not to H. When L is resyllabified, we know that it is because it's produced as that clear vowel as it is in onsets, and H is produced as Z. It's not J, not Sh, but Z. And as to why it's only R and L, as I've bulleted, I'll make a rhetorical question about that later and then try to answer it. So here are some examples of that resyllabification. I know you might be wondering about 2A. How can we tell really that, since the data I'm looking at are mostly transcription data and haven't measured it, how can we tell that that R has been resyllabified? That's where it becomes fun and useful that the data I've looked at are child data, because for Inesh, one of the kids in this conference, when she produced R in that environment, she actually produced it as the clear vowel. So we knew that it was an onset. Yeah. As well, at the end of the utterance, they resyllabify by adding an epithetic in. So things like my flower, minha flor, is produced as minha flor. Don't speak Portuguese, please forgive my pronunciation. I meant to take that out and move it to the end of the joke. So, I talk about these data in sort of optimality theoretic terms in order to explain why this resyllabification occurs and why it affects the consonants that it does. So in optimality theoretic terms, I say that European Portuguese, when thinking about coda, says nuh. Or more formally, they have a constraint against the codas. So here's my rhetorical question. Hey, why doesn't H get resyllabified utterance finally when R and L do? So we know from knowing some things about Portuguese, which I'm going to tell you now, that H kind of behaves differently than other codas. And this kind of matches the sort of thing we see across linguistically with S and S-like things. In that, if you look in part B, right in that middle word here, we have shall, again, forgive my pronunciation, but that F is never pronounced. It's spelled in a lot of places, but nobody ever actually produces F in that word. It's shall. Previous work on this dialect has analyzed that as a coda of an empty-headed syllable. I'm not going to talk about the motivation for that. This is appendix here. I'm just going to go with the terminology and that's something we'll look into later. Yeah, but importantly, we have the utterance final esh, and we see that we don't get the appendices of our I, and it's not resyllabified there. So I started, when analyzing these data for a course with Darren Flynn, to spend a lot of time just staring data and trying to investigate why what's happening. And I noticed that in alternations where words ended with R or didn't, there seemed to be some kind of apparent stress shift, where if you put an R at the end of the word, the stress moved from whatever syllable was on before to this now potentially heavy syllable. So we have começa here. When it has an R at the end, it's in the infinitive form, it comes começar. A couple other examples of that there. However, I saw no hint of any of these things happening with Esh. As we see here, we have Inigo and Imigos. I can't pronounce these at all, but the final syllable is not stressed just because of the Esh there. Please take my word for it. Davis 2011 is chapter 1B in Handbook of Phonological Theory. Shows a lot of different languages that apparently may have some sort of minimal sonority threshold for moraicity, which is, in my opinion, a delightful way of saying that in some languages sonorants may be moraic while obstruents are not. Although in this language we only have 3 codas, we probably can't make that generalization. It could be happening. So I decided to investigate whether I could work out patterns of similar data using some constraints to see if we can actually predict or account for this pattern, this difference between different kinds of codas. So I used no coda as I discussed before, but since that wasn't really sufficient to describe the difference between the codas, I also considered don't have a consonant with a mora, and don't emphasize a vowel. I'm going to walk you through these. There's kind of a few all on one slide. But if you look at the first example of Koraki, thanks, we see that in the case where our space is in its original position, we violated don't have a consonant with mora, but if it's resyllabified, it doesn't violate that constraint. However, with Esh, if Esh stays in situ where it was, it doesn't violate don't have a consonant with mora. And so we're able to go with the resyllabified version, because this does violate no coda, while this one doesn't. Also, we have differences between the utterance final ones, where having the Esh at the end of the utterance doesn't violate consonant with mora, but if you emphasize the vowel, you violated don't emphasize vowel. Please forgive my line, I took a picture of it. I think that was my cursor. So, I don't think this is the latest version, but it should say part B if I recall correctly. So regarding resyllabification across word boundaries, so thinking about those examples where it's utterance medial, we have word ending in consonant followed by a word starting with a vowel. The coda from the first word is appearing as the onset of the second word. So there's some sharing, it seems, of consonants across a word boundary. And what that means to me is that we have some mismatch between what we thought lexically, syntactically was the shape of the word, and what the word comes out as sort of phonologically. I'm a little wary of saying the produced word, because produce syllables and more, we produce sounds, but let's keep that aside. So I was wondering are those phonological words, the two ones that are sharing a consonant, are they separate or are they grouped together in some way? And to illustrate the sort of problem we're dealing with, the diagram shows, okay, the L from the first word is no longer connected to the first, it's kind of being stolen by the second word. So, from some previous work on English, we know that function words can optionally attach to the words following them as prosodic critics. However, these pairs of words that we're looking at in European Portuguese come in all shapes and sizes. They're not restricted to function words, they're not restricted to stress or unstressed syllables, they're not restricted to compounds or determiner noun pairs or enclitic, fixed expressions, any of these things that we've seen in other language croissant or croissant clicks. It really appears that this RESL application is systematic and motivated only by phonological constraints. If we have a coda, we don't want to have a coda anymore. If there's some possible way to fix it, we do. So this led me to, again, part of the course material, we were reading it, was good timing, that it all came together, to think about Lisa Selbert's match theory. This theory involves a series of constraints which govern the relationship between syntax and phonology, and this can be at the level of the clause, at the level of the phrase, or at the level of the word. But I'm going to focus specifically on words because that's what I'm dealing with. So Selbert's match word states that a word in syntactic constituent structure must be matched by a corresponding prosodic constituent, call it lowercase omega, in phonological representation. And what I'm arguing here is that the European Portuguese phonological word may not be identical to our originally syntactic lexically stored one, but it does correspond. I mean, we know we are using that word. But the edges are just fuzzy. So my real thought on this is that maybe fuzzy is okay. And as Selberg herself states, prosodic well-formless constraints, not constraints on syntactic prosodic structure relation, are responsible for any divergence between syntactic constituency and prosodic constituency produced by the grammar. And what that means is, if there is some mismatch between the lexical word and the phonological one, it's the phonological rules that are causing this problem. And since we were able to come up with an optimality theoretic phonological reason for why these sounds change their places, that seems pretty on the level to me. Also, work by Ito and Messer 2009, Windsor 2012, discusses constraints on the crispness of word edges, and that's my accusation on there. They might do it, but please note that it says crispness, not crispiness. It's different. But essentially, they discuss crisp edges and say that having a crisp edge means that the spread or sharing of phonological or prosodic features is not allowed between words. So I'm thinking that in Portuguese, our edges are not so crisp. Things are allowed to move around. I might have done a little quickly through things, but some things we or I rambled on about at length. European Portuguese codas, there are a limited number of them. European Portuguese speakers don't seem to like them, but will deal with them if they have to. Then we talked about more in European Portuguese and how it doesn't seem to like them. H doesn't have them, but other consonants will deal with them if they have to. As well, we talked about the syntactic word and the phonological word and how they relate. I'm going to give a really dated joke here, but I say that they're best buds, like the dog's a cat from Homeward Bound, but they're different from each other, like most dogs and cats. So some feature directions and bits that I'd like to work on for this research. I'd really like to get some more data. I especially want to watch for stress shift with L and coda because that R ending is for the infinitive, and I didn't see as many endings in L, or hardly any. And I really want to see if we see evidence of that same sort of stress shift with L. As well, I'd like to get some more background research, info, data, anything I can find on what European Portuguese prosodic phrases actually look like. Do we see the same sort of groupings like we do in English? Things like that. Could they be grouping words together, or do they tend to keep them separate? I'm not sure, and I'd like to know. As well, I'd like to expand upon the match theory discussion and the crisp edge ideas. So I realize that's kind of just that I sort of spitball about and talk about, but I don't really have such concrete analyses as for the earlier parts. I'd like to thank you for listening and my Portuguese friend for checking over my transcriptions. Yeah, so thank you very much. Any questions? Yes.
You talked about it at the beginning, and I'm not familiar with what standard and online is. And you didn't define it, could you just
Yeah,
define it?
sure. It's essentially things that occur at word edges, or phonological patterns that are restricted to word edges, which is something you might want to think
Well, yeah,
about.
it's something I'm thinking about, but.
Yeah, of course.
I was just curious, slide 9, example 4b, where you talk about esh in like possibly being codas of empty-headed syllables.
Yeah, sure.
Lots of military photos we see. Yeah. Pleasant thoughts. As you go back to it, so like it says eshtash, shtao, boash. Yeah, so it looks like. So at first I was curious, like why is the not deleting an eshtash, and then I figured, well, it's probably because that syllable's stressed.
It's a different word. Actually.
Well, then that's the other question is like, is it just a lexical thing that this is happening, or is it regular?
It might actually be a lexical thing because I analyzed those. I did analyze this ESH thing in my master's thesis, and I excluded codas of independent syllables from my global discussion of ESH and looked at them on their own, and it really seemed like all the words I excluded were variations of 2B.
Okay.
So it may be lexical. I'd like to double check that and see if you see it for other words as well.
Okay, so it might just happen in those words, and those are probably really frequent words
Yeah.
in Portuguese. So
And it's not a gradient phenomenon.
Yeah.
They're never there.
okay.
I don't know to what extent you've thought about this, so I'm going to talk a little bit. You were really hesitant to say that there's sonority cut off for what is and isn't Moravian based on the fact that there's only 3 coded consonants. I wouldn't be nearly as hesitant to say it because the learner's going to get exactly that amount of evidence and come to the same conclusion. But I'm wondering what data you would want to find to become less hesitant about that. Would you look at second language data or?
I think it'd be nice to look at some other related language. Or even historical data on it. I'm not sure. I just have a lot of trouble saying it's definitely the fact that it's an obstruent when there's only a few of them. And there are other places as well. I just don't want to commit quite yet without thinking a little further on it. And it's entirely possible. I'm looking at those other languages that David's discussing. Sorry. It really seems to be a sign of an obstruent distinction, and that could be why. My other thought is why is it might be this way in Portuguese is that we do get that esh in that special position in 2B. And I'm wondering if speakers are hearing that and tuning into the fact that esh is somehow different because it has this special environment. So it may not be that it's an obstruent, it may be that it's doing other things, and they go, okay, I don't have to worry about esh.
I had just something to add to your thought that fuzzy word edges are okay. Since at the end you were like, yeah, I'll need more. So there was a fun workshop at Amherst earlier this summer, which was on basic match theory. So it was about, it was a bunch of phonologists and syntacticians kind of geeking it out over match theory, and these accelerators have been evidently, I don't know, introduced with a couple of talks and then sat there and had great discussion anyway. And Ethan and Meshko were there with some later work than this, so more recent work, and they had very tricky data from English, actually, very exotic language, where they ended up arguing we have to tweak things like, and I think they were talking about the phrasal level, not the word level, but we have to tweak matched phrase, and instead of having, all the constituents within the phrase must also be contained in a phonological phrase, which was Emily Elkner's idea. They said, okay, we just need an existence criteria, so there exists a phonological phrase, and then they had all the other constraints like crisp edge and like these other things to take care of the mismatches, which kind of seems the direction that you're heading.
Yeah, that's
So yeah, so like their work might actually help because they were looking at the word and phrasal levels in English.
Yeah, and maybe that's an unintentional leap in my reasoning, but I think of correspondence essentially as being for every element in this one level, there must also be an element in one level. So really for me, it just sounds something that's very existential, not necessarily how they relate, but if there's an A, there's got to be a B, not necessarily there's a line between them.
Well, and people have defined it different ways, right? So
Yeah.
if you define it that way, right?
That's great, thank you.
Yes. Have you compared this to Brazilian Portuguese or to Spanish?
Not
At
yet.
least, because I don't see how, I think it's very similar how those languages, I mean, there's no esh, obviously, in Brazilian Portuguese in this context, but in the same context, but I think the resal application occurs very similarly in Brazilian Portuguese and also Spanish. And like inside number 4, that same is true in Brazilian Portuguese and also Spanish. 'Cause in Spanish, if the vowel end, or if the word ends in a vowel N or S, then the stress is on the second to last syllable. If it ends in any other consonant that's not N or S, the stress is on the last syllable,
Oh, that's wonderful.
which explains slide 4 as well. And I think that's true in Brazilian Portuguese too.
Yeah, and that might get back to Joy's point, that might be a good way to look into.
Because they don't have, so you can't compare the same thing because there's no, the plural of estar, third person plural doesn't start with an E in Spanish, but you can do the singular with, you'd have to be, oh no, it does start with an E, so it's, never mind, you can do it. Sorry, I was thinking of something else. Yeah, so it would be similar, but you're not going to get the sh, obviously. Well, except, with exceptions, you come very close to getting that sound in Peninsular Spanish, but it's not exactly the same sound. It's slightly different.
All these things now. Great things, thank you.
The reslavification thing with different moracity Nakotas intrigues me, so I wonder if you predict that if you were, I don't know, to measure the vowel before reslavification, whether you predict that there would be a difference in the reslavification of consonants that are presumed to be Moraic versus ones that are not Moraic. It would be a little bit of phonetic support for, it could just be a significant effect, not like a phonological lengthening effect, but just that,
Yeah,
like
that's
a
certainly,
trace of the more of something.
that is certainly something we can look into. I probably won't find different data for that because like I said, the recordings I have, I don't know how much of the adult speakers I have, but it's mostly child speakers. Child learners, I should say.
It's a very interesting question because quite a few languages have been set up with, we claim that they have different, some of the consonants are Moraic and some are not. And then if you have a reslavification language, which, you know, is a bunch of Romance languages, a bunch of others, it would be pretty fun to text.
Just to go on that previous point, so you're looking at Lisp and Portuguese. I'm just wondering what the motivation for that was. Is that because you had more data on that particular dialect?
Well, the child's database has a corpus that is specifically recorded in Lisbon, and a lot of the background research I did, that was the dialect they described. So the things that motivate, my phonemic transcriptions are actually based on Lisbon Portuguese. It was more convenience and correlation between what my data had and what the literature was talking about.
But do you see uniformity across Portugal or?
I'm not sure. Let's see.
I had a question maybe about slide 13, which was your sort of the OT analysis, which it looks like it's kind of early, but I was wondering if you had ideas about how you were going to implement this difference between the FLAP and L versus ESH, because of course right now you've got these 4 different, like on the next one, you've got the 4 different tableaux, and you've got the exact same constraints, and yet the first 2 get treated differently than the second 2, which tells me that there are some constraints that you haven't put into the table yet, right?
Yeah, I was looking at this the other day actually, and well, for one thing, I don't have the faithfulness constraints to keep the input the way it should be.
Exactly, yeah.
Needs a little more attention. I'd be grateful for the thoughts.
We should talk about that.
Can I just add real quick to Christina's comment about how it could change? My guess is the further north you go, the less they're going to drop the unstressed E's in Portuguese. But however, I think it's valid that you would have Lisbon because that is where the majority of the Portuguese speakers live. I mean, the population is just so much bigger there. But then again, you do have a lot of contact with other varieties as well in Lisbon, and so that could affect things as well.
So we don't have lunch coming.